and welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Yara, who is the founder of seaofknowledge.org. She is an educator with a ton of experience, but she also has this passion for helping nurture the social and emotional learning in children. So she wants them to not only grow up and be academically able to do things, she also wants them to grow up to be kind and compassionate and resilient individuals. So over on her blog, she has shared tons of printables and activities and resources to help nurture kids in a social and emotional learning and in their academic skills as well. So we got a chance to dive deep on the importance of play and learning and that connection between play and learning, as well as talking about social and emotional learning and social skills and all about the different things that we can do to connect with our kids to help build those strategies that they need, and just the importance of social and emotional work that we are doing with our students and our kids as we're raising them. So I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Yara. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Janine. I'm so glad to be here.
So you and I connected through our email service, which I think is so funny. We just happened to realize that we do a lot of things in common. We have a shared audience. And so for people who may not be familiar with you and your work, who are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, can you please tell us a little bit about you and your work and how you got to do what you do?
Sure. So I started teaching, back in about 12 or 15 years ago. And then I started to see that there was a big gap in resources in teaching, especially for younger kids and for social and emotional learning as well. So I found that there was a big gap in those areas where we couldn't really find resources to help engage kids in that way back then. And I started to share them on the website. And first, I started to share them with my colleagues, of course, and then I shared them through emails, and I was sending things around and that. Then I thought, I met a couple of people that were sharing them through websites, and I started to teach myself about that. And I started to share them on a blog, and just a basic blog back then. It was back on Blogger, so it was it was a free service that you can just share things on. And then it really escalated from there. While I was teaching, I was sharing things, and then the website just grew and grew. And I had so many people reach out to me and say they needed more resources in this area and that area. So that's how it grew, really. I was really honored to be sharing this stuff with the world. It's amazing how we can reach so many people around the world. It really is amazing.
It's incredible, right? And it just sounds like it was such an organic experience for you where you were just doing this because this is what was working for you. This is something that you were sharing with your colleagues, wanted to share it with everybody. And it is really neat. You and I were talking before we started recording about the loveliness of being able to connect with people who are doing the same work around the world. And it's very interesting to be able to do that and to share this good information. And obviously people are really drawn to what you do, and especially about the playfulness of it, the playful, fun, activity-based work that you do.
That's right. I found that with kids, they have such a short attention span. So you've got them for that for that little amount of time. So you want them to be engaged in an activity that they, in play. So when you catch them in play, it doesn't feel like a chore to them. Growing up, we never had that. So we didn't have that. We had more of a schooling academic kind of, you read and you write, and that's how you learn, so we didn't have the playful aspect of learning. And I felt like we were missing a lot of that when we were kids. Not that we missed our childhood, but we didn't get that playfulness that kids get these days, which you can reach them in so many ways. Sensory play, crafting. So with my social skills, I added a lot of crafts in the last year, and they've really taken off because there's hardly anyone that's actually engaging kids with crafts and social skills. It's very hard to combine the two.
It is. It's very tricky to find good quality materials that actually also speak to that social skills piece. And the connection between play and learning is so vital. And you and I have spoken about this before, that all the research that's been done about how when you learn something in play, it lasts longer, it's fixed more strongly. There's some incredible books all about play. So, The Power of Play, I'll list a few in the show notes, of some of my favorite play resources, because I think there's something so powerful and sometimes overlooked when it comes to learning is incorporating play into that.
100%. I think play is such an important component. I don't think many people realize how important it is. When people think of play, they think, oh, it's just you give them a toy and they play with it. That's really not play. If you want to incorporate play and skills like your academic and social skills, you need to be a bit more intentional about it. So when you actually prepare it, I don't think many parents know about it though, so I don't blame them for not realizing what it is. I think they just assume I'll just buy them a toy and they can play with it independently, and that's not really what it is, you know. So they can do that, of course, but there are specific ways that you can incorporate play to help them learn. Yeah.
Absolutely. And learning things like self-regulation, learning things like how to take turns, learning things like how to cooperate with other people. That is done through learning and playing with other kids. And when you want to make the play keep going, you learn to self-regulate so you can keep playing. And that's
Yes.
motivating for them, which I think is so fun to think about.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And they won't be able to get that. They'll only get that through that experience of them playing with others, socially connecting with others, especially with so in the last month I've been creating things related to coping with anger, the emotion anger,
Mm.
because kids feel that anger just like we do, but we have learned some coping mechanisms as adults, but we're more free than kids to work on that the coping skills, but kids don't have that. So we need to give them some tools to recognize anger and how to manage it, because it's so important, because as you grow up as an adult, if you don't know how to manage it as a child, it really catches up with you as an adult.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. That's why, people will ask me, why do you teach coping skills to kids? And I said, because kids become adults and we want
Yeah.
kids to be able to learn to
Yeah.
cope with their anger and cope with their stress and cope with their anxiety when they're little, so they can build on those skills and walk out into the world and interact in society in a way where they are showing and expressing all their feelings, which are okay, in safe and healthy ways. It's okay to be angry. I say this all the time. It's okay to be angry. It's what you do with that anger that matters. And you want to be able to help them come up with those strategies that will work that are safe and healthy, and keeping everybody around you in a safe space, keeping yourself safe, not breaking anything, but just being able to say, I'm angry and it's okay.
And it's okay, exactly. Yeah, because many, I'm not saying many, but some people see that anger and then they retaliate with more anger. And then the child just recognizes that as, wow, I shouldn't do that. But at the same time, this is how I feel. And they just don't know where to place it. And they start acting out in different ways. For example, hitting things, harming themselves, harming others, that this is where it starts. This is where it starts. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we're starting to talk about that importance of social and emotional learning. So in a lot of the stuff that I do, social and emotional learning just is all interwoven through that. It's all about making sure that kids learn the essential social and emotional skills. So can you talk a little bit more about why that social and emotional learning is so key, and some things that you do in your work to promote that?
Sure. So I had many people reach out to me for example, teachers and parents, and asking me, oh, my child is not able to sit down to, for example, play or do this activity for 5 seconds. There are so many things that connect to the social and emotional aspects of things. You don't really know until you're you're actually teaching kids to know that how important it is to bring them together. So for example, they're all connected to academic learning. If your child doesn't have their basic needs met, which is basically, food, hunger, and their social and emotional, for example, their emotions, if they're not met, they're not gonna be able to sit down for a lesson or focus with you on anything. So the emotions, if they're tired, if they're upset, angry, someone said something, and they're not going to be able to do anything. So you can't reach them in any other way if their emotional needs are not met. So I think that's a very important thing to mention. And with what I do is I try. So for example, with the website that I have, I've created a lot of activities that are academic. So it started off with academic skills because I was teaching kids myself. And it started off with that because I needed it myself. But then I realized the kids needed something else. And like I needed to calm them down. I didn't really like the discipline aspect of kids, disciplining kids. Don't do this, stop doing this, I think I was young when I started teaching, and I suppose that really like hit me hard. I'm like, wow, I did 4 years of learning to be telling kids to stop doing this and stop doing that. I struggled with that when I was teaching, so I needed something to get their attention to help them, learn to cope with their feelings, especially when I wanted to reach them in academic ways. For example, I would start with let's do some breathing techniques, and I'll teach them how to breathe. I'll have them do a craft with breathing, and they'll use, for example, their finger to count the breathing. So 1, 2, and they count as they breathe before we start the activity to calm them down. And I noticed that it's really after recess or lunch when they're just so active that you needed them to calm down. And I started to use them, and then many teachers started asking for them, and that's how it really grew. Yeah.
And you know what? There's something about those transitional moments during a school day that is where a lot of messy things can occur. That's where a lot of big feelings are
Yes.
happening, big movements of bodies, and just trying to get
Yes.
everybody back and seated and actually able to do more work. Those transition pieces are so huge. So to be able to integrate a strategy, a deep breathing strategy, a coping strategy, to do
Yeah.
that practice before you sit down and actually do the activity. And that's brilliant. I think it's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, because many people, so many, even teachers would say, oh, we don't want to waste time on that. It's not wasting time. You need to focus on that so that you can get them to do the activity correctly. Otherwise, you're going to be repeating it. You're going to have strays. You're going to have kids that are going to be just on something else, going to toys, and they're not gonna focus on the activity. And I noticed that it was when I did it, that when I did those coping mechanisms, the activities that I pulled out, when I did those, the kids focused a lot better, and they were able to grasp what I was teaching them after the activity. And you notice that there's chaos as well. There are kids that are more emotional than others. You're always going to have a few kids that need more support than others. If you have the class under control, then you're able to give those kids a bit more focus. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I love how you are able to talk about how it really does impact the classroom in a positive way and make it easier for you to be able to then give the attention that those other kids who are a little bit more high need will need. And they require that in order for them to get back on track, to get back into the rhythm of what we're doing after lunch and after recess in the classroom, which is always a little
Yes.
bit tricky. Always
Yes.
tricky. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes in the mornings too, like it's
Yes.
it's amazing. You can get really crazy days. You don't know when they would be, but you can get some days where they're just not focused. They're just, and just like we have emotions that we try to deal with, kids also have them, and they have them at different times. And you've got a classroom of kids with those emotional needs as well. So the emotional needs of children shouldn't be ignored at all, because it's something we grew up with when we were younger, and I want to change that because it wasn't really looked at. They looked at our academic skills, they looked at our maybe our physical, how we're growing, for example, but they never ever looked at our emotional skills and how we're growing in that aspect. Yeah.
No, not unless you were in like
Yeah,
therapy, did you
yeah.
talk about your emotions? That was not part of our curriculum. And I think it's
Yeah.
kind of neat to be on this, watching what my own kids are learning and understanding in school, and being able to help support and help people learn to manage those emotions in safe and healthy ways. It's a fun thing to be able to do because, as adults, it can take time to figure that stuff out. But if you can figure it out when you're young, it's so much better for you just in terms of being able to manage whatever
The
comes your
cope,
way.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many of us have, anxiety, even depression, things that we don't know how to cope with as adults because we don't know where it's coming from. But it's
Yeah.
coming from that aspect when we were kids. We weren't able to really deal with our emotions then. And a lot of us bottle it up, which is something that I think many people do. And that's why we go to therapy. That's why we try to talk about it. And that's if you already do it as a child, especially the open communication with the adults and with everyone around you, you're used to doing it. So by the time you're an adult, it's a thing that you just do, and you're able to cope with it a little bit better. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes what gets a little bit tricky is that we as parents, when we're parenting our young kids, it's hard for us to necessarily know how to communicate and how to make those connections. So do you have any advice or suggestions for the grown-ups who are raising these little ones, like and
Yeah.
how to communicate, how to
It's
connect?
yeah, it's so hard to manage your own emotions as a parent as well because you've got a lot of them. And let's face it, many parents do not have enough sleep. They're
Yep.
constantly on the go and constantly thinking about the next thing I need to do, the next thing I need to do. I think the main thing there is to actually carve out some time, say if it's in the morning or the afternoon with your kids and say, oh, this time before bedtime, that's the time I'm going to speak to them, ask them about their day, let them tell me about just give them a bit of time to talk. If you don't have give them time to talk to you freely without telling them what to say or asking them the questions, because sometimes with kids they say good, or some kids might not even elaborate. It might not work the first few times, or even it might not work for an entire month, but if you keep doing it, they know this is the routine, this is what I need to tell, I can talk to my mum this time. They know that time that is allocated for them before bed or before when they come back from school, before they have dinner. That's a good time for them to maybe speak to their parent, because open communication is the only way you can hear from your child if there's anything that is concerning them. And let's face it, there's I don't want to say this, but there's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now. They may be seeing it and they just don't know how to cope with it. And if you don't open the communication line with them, then they're going to bottle everything up as well. They're not going to be talking about it, and they're going to think that it's embarrassing, or as they get older, to speak about these things. But if you make everything basically more open, so for example, talking about how they play with their friends, those are things that we don't really ask the children. How do you play? They obviously play running around, but they will tell you more and more about it as you ask, throughout it protects them socially, also protects them mentally, because they might not be able to understand why a child hit me, or you can explain that to them in that time period. Yeah.
No, and I think that is, one of those building blocks of being able to communicate about harder things, more challenging things as they get into those teen years, is to have that base of being able to have those conversations. And you're absolutely right. Those times when it is quiet, bedtime is when a lot of kids will start talking, when the lights are out and it's bedtime routine. And then it can feel like they're trying to prolong it, but at the same time, they are also giving you good information. And I actually just recorded a podcast. I think it came out, about ways to connect with kids and teens. So I'll link to that in the show notes because I think it's one of those things where we we can get caught up in our own things that we have to do, our own to-do lists, and in their academics, but we also just need to understand who they are as people. Like, what do you like
Yeah.
to do for fun? How do you play? What are you playing with your friends? What are you reading? What are you watching? What music are you listening to? Different ways that we can connect with them, because if we can connect with them, especially the younger we can do it, then when they get older, we have that practice. And when problems get bigger, then they still feel like they have a place that they can come and talk with us about it.
Yes. If you don't build it at a young age when they're in their teens, which is the most critical time, I think, because I don't know, I honestly do not know from all my friends and everyone that I've spoken to, basically, I don't know anyone that has not struggled with something in their teens. At the teens are a very critical stage in a person's life. I did as a teen. I was, very quiet, I was just struggling with my own because we had moved countries, and then obviously I was trying to learn two different languages and try to catch up with everything. So I think that impacted my social skills as well, because I was mainly just, to myself, because I just didn't feel adequate enough to communicate with my friends because I didn't know their language. So
Yeah.
yeah, it impacted my teen years a lot. And then I grew out of that, of course, but they were hard years because there's hormones, there's a million things happening in your body as well as a teen, which is, you think everything is strange, everything is, not normal, so and you don't have an outlet, you don't know who to speak to other than your friends, of course. So, and your friends are going through the same thing. So yeah.
Sometimes it feels like the blind's leading the blind when they talk to each other, but that's also developmentally appropriate that they're kind of trying to find the people that they connect with and they enjoy. But I always want them to be able to have a place to go back to, a safe base to go, somebody to talk to, a trusted grown up, whether that is a cousin or an older sister or brother who is an adult and who can talk to you about things, a coach, a person who is with a religious affiliation that you really are connected to. Whatever you find, um, where you can find a trusted adult to be able to talk to about the things that you're going through, I think it makes a huge difference. And the one thing I will say is I know that parents will think, oh, if you have teenagers, that means it's too late. Absolutely not. It is not too
No,
late. You can
no, it's
always
not.
pause and you can reset and you can go back and builds that connection. It is never too late. You can
It's
always build
never.
a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, when I was young, I had, it could be a very trusted source. For example, an auntie, I used to
Mm.
tell her, I'm struggling with this. I didn't like this. I never used to like my maths teacher when I was
Ah,
a young, because he was very strict, and, it basically wasn't teaching in a way that I got it, so, and so math wasn't really my strong point, I admit. But at the same time, there was like 80% of the class failing with him. So
oh,
he was doing something ridiculously wrong. He had this like a technique which was a bit humiliating for students. He would make you go up to the board. You don't know the answer. He'll make fun of you,
oh
which
gosh.
made, yeah, it made a lot of people, that destroyed a lot of my peers, myself and my friends. But we kind of connected on that, so we
Yeah.
didn't really, yeah, enjoy his lessons. Nobody learned, and so we stood up to him towards the end. But yeah, like I had an auntie which I spoke to. You always need to have someone that you can
Yeah.
trust to speak to. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Yara, we could talk forever, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
So I always have one more question that I ask my guests, every single person on the podcast. What are your coping skills? How do you rest and relax?
So I love that question. It took me a while to get there, but there are a lot of things that I try to do now. So if I, for example, had a hard day, I just give myself like some time, even if it's at the end of the day, at night, something like I enjoy doing. Reading is my favorite thing to do. A lot of the time, obviously, I'm in the kitchen just trying to prepare things. It's not really my therapy because there's a lot of cleaning there to do. So I try to find extra time, for example, to do some like skincare, a bath, things that I don't normally do, which I haven't, done in a long time. I just try to find that time, because self-care, even for yourself, you don't know when you'd need it. So if you have those tools already there, I'm going to go and read tonight. So After this, I'm just going to find some time for myself to kind of cope with these emotions. I used to write in a journal, but I just don't have time to do that because I'm always writing on the blog.
Yeah.
So I love to do that as well. I try to find time to do that. But yeah, those are the main things I do. Yeah. And spend time with my husband when I can as well, which can get pretty crazy, our schedules.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's a season for strategies, right? Like you're not in a journaling season right now. That's okay. So
Yeah.
you're doing other things. If you're in your skincare season, good for you. Like that is
Yeah.
an amazing thing to do.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. You find ways to use them, and you're not always in the mood to do that particular thing, and you find something else to do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because sometimes it doesn't work. It depends on your mood. It depends on what you're dealing with. It depends on your space. It depends on what you really need at that moment. And it's really about tuning in with yourself to figure out what are my things that make me feel good and make me happy and make me relax. And then how can I fit those into my day? I think that's a brilliant way to go about it.
Yeah.
So
Fitting them in is so important. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So if people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
They actually on the website. I have many links there for whatever they need to find. I mean, the search, because I've got a lot on the website. They can search what they're looking for, and on the website I've got my contact details and everything, so they can access it through there too.
So it's Sea of Knowledge,
Sea of
SEA,
Knowledge,
Sea
yeah,
of Knowledge.
SEA, yeah, of knowledge.org, yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's awesome. And I saw you have new social stories up there too for students with special needs.
Yes, yes, I loved working on those. So I had a request from a teacher, and then I ended up polling my audience for which ones they would like me to write. And it took me about 2 years to write all of them. So it was a lot of research to write each one, yeah, and what I should include in each one. And I plan to add some more as the years go on, because you always think, all right, this is a good topic to talk about with kids. They are really difficult topics to bring up. There are some difficult topics to bring up with kids, and with social stories, you can make it fun. You can make it a story time, and then they start telling you their own stories. I love them for that, really, because those are the things, the taboo topics that you feel like, I don't know how to bring this up to talk to kids with. You can just bring up that social story and go, okay, I'm gonna read this story, and then it opens up the line of communication. It really does. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to do as a therapist working with kids is to read a story because
Yeah.
it sparks the conversation. It's so much easier than to dive into a conversation that might be difficult. Like maybe it's difficult for you to just talk about your anger and like it might be
Yeah.
hard. And
Yeah.
to use the story makes it so much easier to sort of bridge that gap and then get going on the hard work.
Yes, exactly. And oftentimes I find you don't even need to say more because the
Yeah.
story said everything. So yeah, you just need to open up that line, and then they'll start talking to you. It doesn't, because I found that, because when I was teaching, I struggled with that too, because I was a young teacher as well. So I didn't really know how to bring up these topics with kids. But yeah, those are great ways to do it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
I'm so honored to be on here. Thank you so much, Janine. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. And everybody, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, please feel free to share it and with your colleagues and friends, and give us a rating or review wherever you are. And as always, don't forget about yourself. Take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.